Yo everyone, welcome back to another episode of Over the Bridge podcast. It's your boy Bilal, joined in the studio by, on my right,
it's Khalil, aka Mr. Segway.
Oh yeah, you finally given yourself that name. You've been trying to get that one in for a while.
Listen, I messaged B saying, I ain't got a nickname. And I was going to call myself Mr. Segway. No one's going to even tell me it's a nickname. I'm just going to... I'm going to create it for myself.
I've never heard of people nicknaming themselves.
That is, fam, it's the new wave. So yeah, it's happy to be here again, back in the live studio with important people in my life, plus another person that's also going to be introduced in a moment.
Yeah, we'll come to you in a second. I know you're like ready to talk at it. And on my left, we've got
Baker. I've not come up with a nickname yet. I guess I'm slacking. I've already go for like Chef.
Chef?
Yeah. It was a nickname that stuck in sixth form.
Isn't it?
Yeah, it stuck in sixth form.
Because of cooking?
Because of my name.
Because you're... Oh, yeah. I was like, why?
No, I like that one though. Like there was a lot of like funny ones, but that one stuck.
I remember that being your handle on something.
Yeah, exactly. It used to be my Instagram handle at one point.
To be fair, on that note, I feel like you cook up thoughts. Your cooking process on the podcast is a slow cook.
Yeah.
And then you have your incisive... Your question comes, so I like that.
There's a lot of applications.
It can work.
You're calling yourself Mr. Segway.
Listen, I can work with everything.
We're missing our boys Patrick and Quaker. I think Patrick's in Brazil.
Potentially, yeah.
He's in Brazil
abroad.
by his socials. I think Quaker's probably on his course, so good luck to them. But we're also joined in the studio by just over there in front of me, staring me right in my eyes. Why you smiling at me?
I don't know, man. I'm just happy to be here, bro.
One of my good friends, our good friends, and actually a former guest at our first ever live show back in 2019. We were talking about masculinity taking off the mask. Some of you might have been there. You might remember. We're joined by Head of Facilitation.
Director.
All
right. Get it right.
He said, come on. He said, come on. Director.
Times have changed. Things are on the up, you know.
Director of Facilitation at Beyond Equality, TEDx Speaker. And I'm going to call you a masculinities expert.
Okay, I'll take that. It's a lot of pressure.
It's
a lot of pressure. But I've been doing this for a long time. I've been doing it for a long time, so I should be by this point.
You should be saying that. You should be bigging up yourself and backing yourself.
It's fair.
My boy Ben Hurst. Ben, how are you, man?
I'm all good, man. Am I all good? I always answer that question automatically. Yeah. I'm like, I'm fine. Nah, I'm actually good. It was my birthday recently. Yeah.
How are you really?
How are you? How's your heart? Nah, I'm all good, man. I feel like I'm chilling. My birthday just passed, so
come on.
Happy birthday.
Some new gloves, new hats.
Yeah.
You're March, baby.
No, April
okay.
2nd.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, very early.
Yeah. Aries, real Aries.
A good birthday then.
Yeah. It was a nice one. I got a manicure, got a pedicure.
I saw you.
At
look
the
like
same time, and two people working on different. It was intense. It was a very intense experience. Not as relaxing as I imagined.
Really?
It would be. Yeah.
Were you more stressed?
No, I wasn't stressed, but it was just that they weren't relaxing. They weren't relaxed. They were working.
Okay.
They were like trying to get through it. And I felt like there was a window of time to get it done. So they were like buffering, shining, cutting quick. And I was like, okay, maybe I'll have a sip of the drink, but I didn't have my hands free. So it was intense, but it was nice. It was nice.
You like one of them sip straws. Like in a hamster cage.
In the hat.
Yeah, all in the hat.
Yeah.
That's
the
more.
twirling thing. That's what I needed in there. And now I know, next time I go back, I'll be there. You'll see on the stories with the straw hat. Yeah. But I'm all good, man.
Good, man. Well, I want to say a massive thank you for joining us this week. I know that this week's been a particularly busy week for you. Do you want to tell us maybe why? What's been going on? I know it was your birthday, but outside of your birthday.
Yeah. That also counts. Adolescence came out a couple of weeks ago. Netflix series, for anybody who hasn't watched it, would recommend. I wouldn't say it's enjoyable, but it's important. And so it's one of those moments, those watershed moments, you know, where like you reach the tipping point of a conversation in culture and something happens that like sparks the debate and then it turns into a conversation that everybody's having. And so I think for us, we've been having this conversation for a long time. And now it seems like everybody else wants to have the conversation as well, which means that you become very busy. So you're out and about. You're doing a lot of talks, a lot of seminars, a lot of people asking questions. There's also a lot of strategizing of like, what do we do? How do we maximize the moment? How do we turn it into something that's important? So it's been hectic, man. Hectic, absolutely psychotic. But
like your name seems to be popping up literally everywhere I look. On my socials.
I'm very famous. I reckon I've got 2 weeks left of
the last time he came to
and
my house, I called him like a Z-list celebrity, but I think he's now bumped right
yeah,
up.
man, I'm on that QB. Hey, I'm working my way up. You'll see me soon. If you haven't seen me already, I'm gonna be there. But yeah, it's been a intense couple of weeks. Yeah. And just a lot of thinking and a lot of conversation. Which in some ways I'm very grateful for. In other ways, I'm a very like leave me alone type of person. You know, like I like being in my house. I like doing what I'm doing. So the streets have been calling me in the last. Is that the right phrase to use? I don't know if it's actually the streets, but like the LinkedIn streets.
Yeah, when people usually use the streets of calling it for
something else,
more seedy.
Yeah. And what is your thinking when like work you've been doing for a long time suddenly captures everyone's attention? Are you like, is this disingenuous or?
It's a good question, man. I'm a hater at heart. Do you know what I mean? Like at my core, I'm a very like no new friends type of person.
Yeah.
And I guess that translates into the work in terms of there's a part of me that's like, where have you lot been? Or like, why you don't know?
Yeah.
And so in that part of it is a bit frustrating. I think there's a lot of people who are like capitalizing on a moment and taking this thing that's happening, taking this moment. Can I keep going? Okay. Taking this moment that's going and trying to turn it into their thing or their like diving board, launch pad, whatever. But at the same time, you have to be grateful because sometimes you never really know if these moments are going to come. You know, like you can work at something for a long time and you never know if it's ever really going to pick up steam. Yeah. I think it's the power of art, man. It's a beautiful thing when somebody creates something that grabs the public consciousness and turns it into something that's energizing. So it's a lot of movement. There's a lot of charlatans. There's a lot of frauds in these streets. But shout out to them as well because the conversation's for everyone. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I think that's something that I've got to learn for myself as well. Is you can be too gatekeepy. You can want to hold on to things and hold on to moments for yourself. But actually, this is what we've been working for, campaigning for the last decade. So it's nice to finally be at the point where we're like seeing people in the public sphere, people in the public eye take it seriously and generate some thoughts. And we're seeing the birthing of new thought leaders, which is always an interesting process. Yeah. Lots of people starting from the beginning. My big thing is just there's no shortcuts. Right. Do you know what I mean? There's no quick way to like years and years of experience of doing something. So there's a lot of like fully baked ideas. There's a lot of half-baked ideas. There's a lot of like buns still in the oven circulating now, exposed to the public. But it's interesting. It's very, very interesting.
Because everyone on LinkedIn anyway, because I'm not on any other socials really at the moment, but everyone on LinkedIn seems to be writing like a thought-provoking post. And I'm like, okay, who are the people that have been doing this for longer? Maybe we should listen to them. But then also everyone's entitled to their own opinion.
Exactly. Right? And everybody's an expert in masculinity. This is the big thing, right? It's like, so the thing that I find uncomfortable, and I use it a lot in workshop context. Like I'm very like, we're all experts in this conversation. Every single person's got lived experience of this thing, regardless of how you've lived it and how you've processed it. You've lived your whole life under the pressures of whatever society says this construct is. And so everybody knows something. Not everybody's good at communicating it, but everybody's got something of value to share in the conversation. Yeah. And I think the big thing is like, how do you create spaces that are fit for purpose for that sharing? And how do you curate those environments where everybody can like give their 2 cents and it be valued and it be important and we can all learn from each other, while still having like frameworks and principles that are important for guiding conversation. Yeah.
I guess one of the things that was on my mind was in regards to the workshops you've been delivering for years now, and then people are now suddenly talking about adolescence. It's like the main thing. Are the themes in adolescence translatable to what's actually going on the ground from the conversations you've been having with men and boys for years?
Yeah, I would say very much so. But the way that they made that show was so smart, man. It was like, it really does cover the full gambit of what I would describe as the male experience in so many different ways, so many different perspectives. And there's no like easy answers. There's no silver bullet. It's not like men are like this and that's why this thing happens. So there's a lot of figuring out to do. But I think if you look through it, I imagine for every person, they'll find themes that are relevant to them. And then I think in terms of our work, there are some definite, like, clear through lines. Stuff like violence is very clear in the show. Do you know what I mean? Violence is a language that everybody understands. It's very present, from police to murder, from violence in school to bullying to, like, there's a range of different places that shows up. I think emotional illiteracy is a big thing. That shows up on the part of men. I think women doing unpaid emotional labor is very present in the show. But, like, if you're not somebody who's tuned into those conversations already, you might not see it and be like, oh, that's the thing. But I like that about it, because it doesn't feel, for me, the show didn't feel too preachy. Do you know what I mean? It didn't feel like
there's a lot of subtleties.
It didn't feel like they had a perspective that they were trying to communicate. It felt like they were like, here's a problem. What are all of the different ways we can understand the problem? And so, the sense that I'm getting is that it's resonating with lots of different people in very different ways. There are some people who are pissed off. There are some people who are like, it didn't do enough. It didn't talk about this. It didn't address this. But I think 4 hours or 4 like 45-minute episodes, there's not a lot of time, and there's a lot to address. Do you know what I mean? But definitely we see a lot of those themes showing up in very different ways. I think the big thing, obviously, is the manosphere, and everybody's like petrified of the manosphere at the moment. In some cases, rightfully so. I think in other ways, like, it's not a new phenomenon. Do you know what I mean? It's not something, I think actually culture at this moment in time is like maybe 2 or 3 years behind the conversation. There was a time 3 years ago when we were walking into classrooms and all of the kids were doing this hand gesture that they'd learnt from Andrew Tate. And were you
seeing this in your school?
Yeah, man.
Bro, we worked in your school, right? Like, this was crazy. It was all the time. And all of the kids were like saying these phrases, and we as educators didn't know what they were or where they were coming from. So there was this figuring out. And I think now we're catching up with that conversation. But yeah, definitely, it's been present. It's been present in lots of different ways.
Yeah, I guess one of the things that I was, as someone watching it, I was like, okay, of course, there's ways that this could be better as a show, right? But it's definitely picking up on themes that I've seen in my own self and in my own life. I remember you saying one way to get into the conversation to ask men and boys, who do you see yourself as
in the show?
I wanted to ask you, who do you see yourself as in the show?
Who do I see myself as in the show? It's a good question. I want to say Ashley Waters, because he's black. No, I want to say D.I. Baskin, but only because I think that was a clear image of somebody who was aware of an issue and was trying to resolve it. And I think that's quite a unique position. You know, like, I think there are lots of us who are aware of an issue and then we're like, oh, it's just another issue to add to the list. But like, being actually, like, I guess that role of like being the detective on the case and trying to solve the problem feels very relatable to me. And then also you're doing that work whilst at the same time trying to figure out your own relationship to all of the stuff and your own relationship to the men in your life and your relationship to the women around you. Like, he's got his wife or his partner, we don't know, but like the woman who's the mother of his child, he's trying to figure out that relationship with that woman, trying to figure out his relationship with his colleagues, he's trying to walk these young people through this journey, ask questions, figure stuff out. That felt very like familiar to me. You know?
Joe was familiar for me. I don't know the lady's name, I can't remember. I just know her from 1,000 Blows. But the therapist, that resonated very much with me. Reason being, as Ben said, there's no quick way to try and influence or change the mindsets of young people when they're bombarded with so many different things that we as adults and educators have never ever experienced ourselves. However, the best way to approach, and if anyone is listening who works in education or works with young people directly, and I know Ben's a massive proponent of this, is through open conversation, non-judgmental conversations. And that's that episode that I didn't expect to be the whole episode, but literally just the conversation where she was just she wasn't trying to judge, she wasn't trying to make him feel bad about himself, although that's how often he was receiving it. She was just trying to ask him questions to find out why do you think the way you think? Who are the men in your life, and what have you, without intention or otherwise, what impression have you got of what it means to be a man from the men you have seen and lived with? And that's when all of this, when I say all of this, when the social media, manosphere, Tate, when all this stuff started to come to the form, we as educators became aware of it because kids were talking about it. And I had to be literally Googling stuff, being like, what? Like Tate who? Because my algorithm...
That's safeguarding, but I don't know why.
Literally. So I had to upskill myself. And I was like, right, so now I need to make sure that if I want to even learn about what these boys are thinking, I need to go in the most non-judgmental. And I need to train my staff and make them aware. You can't go in there to talk with kids with your own kind of preconceptions and ideas of what's right and what's wrong. You just need to ask and find out. And so that's why when you're asking who does Ben see himself as, who do I see myself as, who may Bacon yourself, whatever, it's that the importance of non-judgmental, open conversation with young men about just what they're thinking and how important that is. And when we're thinking about how do we change, because everyone's thinking, well, yeah, but what do you do about it? What do you do about it? Boy, the only solution that I can ever think about is make, as early as possible, have young teenage boys, even younger than that, talking more so that it becomes so normal that when they become adults and fathers, they've become, it's normalized to just talk about what it means to be a man and what it means to be, and then they're going to talk about with their children and their sons. And that's how you can't just change one person's mindset in one conversation by drip feed, innit?
Culture doesn't change overnight. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's what we all want is like, we see an issue and we're like, it's done now, we fixed it. But it is a generational thing.
Without doubt.
And I think, that like, how do you raise that next generation into a way where they're equipped to raise the next generation?
It's
feels like
something
something's been missing.
Even what you said then, what you're talking about, has made me think, I don't remember ever having a conversation about what it means to be a man until I was one.
Yeah, indeed.
Like, I don't think as a teenage boy or as a child, I don't remember this. I might have had it, but I do not remember. That's not a formative conversation.
I don't remember my dad sitting me down and saying, boy, this is what it means to be a man.
Yeah.
You just look at what he's doing and you just think, well, okay, if my dad's doing it, then
that's what I'm
supposed to be doing.
But it's interesting because this week I was talking to Ruben, like Ruben's my son, he's 4. And he said, I said, what do daddies do? That was the conversation we were having.
Good question.
Said, they protect us. And I was like, that's a really interesting answer. I was like,
what? Where did you get that from?
Like, that's a really interesting answer that you're 4 and you've deciphered this from somewhere.
Yeah.
And I was like, why do you think that? And then he just started pointing at other things, right?
Yeah. He was like Shrek.
But basically, I was like, I've been thinking about that all week since he said it. Been like,
where's he got it from?
Get the idea that daddies protect you from?
Yeah.
You know, and that was me trying to get into this conversation about that.
Also, like, what does he understand that you're protecting him?
From.
Yeah. What's the danger?
Yeah.
What's the risk?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's crazy to think that it starts as early as 4.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, but it's present. It's present for your whole life. Like, it's present. I remember thinking about my dad, like, wanting, I think maybe I watched too much like Disney Channel or something as a kid, but I was just expecting there to be a moment where like he would teach me how to shave or he would do you know what I mean? Some kind of like initiation or rite of passage into being a man where you're taught what it is and it just never really comes. And so you figure it out yourself.
Yeah.
But then maybe that is, I mean, there's been a lot of conversation about role models recently, right? But maybe that is part of the conversation is like, how do we usher boys into manhood? What does that look like? And how do we set principles and terms of like what's good and what's bad and like what we should be aspiring to? Because I think part of it is you don't want to be too prescriptive, you know, you don't want to like tell people who they're meant to be, because I think that's where the problem actually comes from. But then also people need guidance. Do you know what I mean? Like, and especially teenage boys need some kind of blueprint or need some kind of like thing that they can aspire to that's inspirational, that they can try and aim for. And obviously they'll fail, right? Like everybody fails, but like how do you guide people down that path, I think is a big question.
Whose responsibility is it to do that? Because I say that in the context of one, Keir Starmer saying this week that every school, I don't know if it's every school, but they should show adolescence in schools.
Yeah.
And me personally, I was thinking, but with what blueprint for teachers to follow to navigate those conversations?
It's a terrible idea. It's a terrible idea.
Right.
Big sign.
I love them and I love the show.
Listen, from any if you're only listening to this episode, the only context I can give that will explain why I'm sighing. And I was about to strips on the mic. But the thing is, there is so...
Just to clarify your role.
I was going to say, I was meant to do that just now. Yeah, so my role, so I'm a safeguarding lead by trade. And now kind of
called him a lord of safeguarding.
Yeah, something
I think
like
that should be in your email.
So now I support schools. I support safeguarding leads in schools is my kind of the nature of my job. And when I heard, so it came, I imagine Keir Starmer saw that I think it's that Netflix have put it on a free, they made it through a free subscription as opposed to their normal platform. Yeah. So obviously any teacher that's got a Netflix subscription could just show Adolescence anyway. But what they're saying is we can allow schools to access the program through this free platform and not require the paid Netflix subscription. And then Keir and his team have then got on Twitter being like, that's a great idea. Let's get it on schools because this is a conversation that all teachers need to have. First and foremost, you cannot advocate for something to go into all schools or be in support of it if it was never created for schools as an educational piece.
It's not a PSHE curriculum.
It's not been, to my knowledge, and then people can correct me, but to my knowledge, it's not been vetted or created with, I imagine, that much educational input from safeguarding experts in that field. I don't know, especially from an educational standpoint, because when we come as teachers, we think, right, you want me to deliver this, fine, but with what training? And you can't just say, put it on the screen and let's just go with it. Yeah. Because the way education works, you have teachers with varying levels of experience, varying levels of confidence.
And there's also no learning resources provided.
There's nothing. The thing is, it needs to be, if you're going to put something in a school, if you look at everything that is made to be in education, it is resourced and it's thought through and you preempt and you have your questions and you think, right, it could go in this direction. So you as teachers, you need to frame it because you're giving it to people who have no idea. To then what, just put it on and then just allow kids to just make up their own mind about it. And the stuff that Ben does on the YouTube, when you dissected the program and you talk through the themes and, well, this scene can make you think of X and this scene can make you think of Y. Like, that's so important rather than just putting it on, allowing kids to just watch it.
I think they should show that rather than
what but it needs to be intact.
I don't know if you're listening to this, Keir, but you need to get my thing. Send my stuff.
But it's a poor idea. It's a poorly thought through idea to think that because this has got so much attention that everyone needs to be talking about it, so let's just put 4 hours. And also, we have teaching to do, let alone put on, like, we've got kids that need to learn academic subjects. And I'm not saying, this conversation, first and foremost, has been happening for years prior to Adolescence being come to the fore on Netflix. It's been happening. And us as educators are trying to do it in the best way possible. And 4 hours of just sitting and watching a program with untrained teachers who are just going to try and do their best to then handle all the conversations that come off the back of it isn't the solution. It's poorly planned. There's no planning. It's just an idea that Keir thought he'd just put his rubber stamp on.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where it was popular for people to say, put it in schools. And so it was easy enough for the Prime Minister to be like...
But you're the Prime Minister. Like, the thing is, do you not understand?
You're the Prime Minister. I think I do support it being shown in some capacity, but I agree that, like, we need to figure out what we're teaching with it.
Yeah.
And if that's not figured out, then obviously there's not much utility because everyone could watch it at home as homework.
That was what I found interesting about the process was like, I went to Downing Street last week to chat with basically...
He said it so casually, innit?
I was going for a walk last week. You know?
I just popped in, as you do. But I think what they were asking for was feedback and consultation on the process. And obviously, like, the thing with Downing Street is, like, it's 45 minutes that you're in there. Do you know what I mean? There's no time to do anything. It's barely time to start a conversation. But from my perspective, I think the thing that was lacking for me was that there was no explanation of what the plan was. And that was what I was looking for. Do you know what I mean? Like, I was looking for because I think there are ways, although I wouldn't advise showing the show in schools, I think if they commissioned us to do it as an organization, I think we would sit down with it and we'd think, right, how do we split this up into clips? How do we create learning guides around these clips?
Correct.
How do we create questions and conversations? But there was just no, and not to say that they don't have anything, because I know Tender are like an established organization who've been doing this kind of work, and also Into Film, so the platform that they're partnering with to get the stuff into schools, have been doing this kind of stuff for a long time. It's not like they've just created something out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But I think for me, it doesn't take seriously the risk that, and I'm quite risk averse. I don't think it takes seriously the risk attached to trying to roll this kind of thing out. I don't think it takes seriously the fact that one in 3 women have experienced sexual harassment now across the country, and there are more women teachers in schools than men. So how many of the women that you're putting in a classroom asking to show this video are victims or survivors of sexual harassment, sexual violence, men's violence against women? I don't think it takes seriously that there are loads of kids coming from households where they've experienced DV, where they've experienced some of the things that maybe they're seeing. There are kids who are survivors of this kind of violence who might be triggered by the videos, that might find it a little bit difficult. And then I think this is also like a conversation that requires some expertise and a lot of ability. You were speaking earlier, right, about this ability to suspend judgment. And it's really difficult. It's very counterintuitive. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not something that comes naturally to people. So it's difficult. What we find anyway when we're in schools is that the teachers that sit in on the sessions are often like, what the hell is going on here? Like, why are you letting them say this stuff? When are you going to challenge them? When are you going to tell them that they're wrong? How are you? And I think that it's a very overwhelming process, and I don't know if like the solution to that is a video. Do you know what I mean? Like, also it replicates the same thing that we saw in the show, which was all of these, like, walking around this school, all of these teachers neglecting their responsibility to teach the kids and just showing them a video, and that clearly not working. And so I don't know if it like is kind of perpetuating the problem that it's trying to solve in some ways. But I think something has to be done, you know, something like, and I think it's good that they're taking action and moving in a direction. I just wish there would have been more of a period of time of like sitting down with experts in the field who have been doing this work for a long time.
It was very reactive.
Yeah,
It's
man.
knee-jerk, man. It's knee-jerk for sure. But then it'll be remiss of schools to not at least reference the program. Like, I've not spoken about it. I'm not in schools day in, day out this time leading on it. But it would, if there are, I'd imagine and hope there are safeguarding leads across the country thinking, our kids are being exposed to not only this program, but other things that are going on. We need to address it. Otherwise, they never have... The thing that schools kind of are unique for is allowing a safe space for 30 young people to speak in a controlled... controlled, safe, like a regulated space with an adult who has their best interests and it can be managed, as opposed to everything's just on the WhatsApp and it's unregulated. So schools need to harness that opportunity. I'm not against adolescence being used as a trampoline, another trampoline to say, right, do you know what? We've actually not spoken to our kids about this for a while. I'm not against that. But as Ben was saying, as I was saying before, very passionately, the solution isn't just show it and think we've ticked the box. Because if someone like me comes in and says, what are you doing at the moment to kind of speak about all the violence? First of all, what are you doing to speak about violence against women and girls? Because that's the priority here. Like, the priority isn't how we're going to train the priority, as much as it is important, it's more important to stop. First of all, let's try to stop violence against women and girls. And then also, let's see if we can try and influence our young men and boys to grow up in a way that's conducive to a more lovely environment for people to live in. But I'd ask that question, and the solution isn't, we sat down as a group and everyone just watched Adolescence for 4 hours. And then what happened? We just moved on.
Also, to Ben's point, in terms of the children that have gone through these kind of things at home, you've now opened them up to like hearing their classmates' opinions about these things.
And there's a lot of opinions.
Unprovoked. And if you don't have a plan to how you deal with that dialogue that's going to be sparked, you're kind of creating a dangerous environment for people that have experienced these things.
No, for sure.
Yeah, it's crazy on some levels, because my mind instantly goes to like the amount of workshops I've done where there's like a PE teacher sitting in there and we've gone through like 90 minutes of this session of like unpacking gender stereotypes and norms and where we get these expectations from and who holds them about who. And then like you're making like you're covering ground and there's traction building and like you're getting somewhere and then somebody's in the classroom, a teacher, and they're like, yeah, but women do lie though. And then you're like, you've just instantly undone the whole thing.
Yeah.
And it's also like, even the provisions that we do have aren't enough. Like we're talking about a lifetime worth of learning for some of these kids. That's 14, 15, 16, 17 years worth of experience of these narratives that they've picked up from their home, from social media, from institutions, from religion, like from all of these places. You can't undo that in six hours. So even less so, you can't undo it with a film or a show. And I think it's just that the big thing for me is like kids, one of the big objectives of our work is that we're trying to build the skill of critical thinking in kids and young people. So we're trying to expose them to thoughts, ideas, questions, and get them to exercise the muscle that says, well, what do I think about this? And why do I think it? And where does it come from? But they don't have that skill. They're not naturally born with it. It's just something that you develop. And so I think it's risky to show them anything that like can lead to a range of different conclusions, because the show is nuanced. It's so complex. Even for adults, it's complex. There's a lot of debate about whether things are true or not, whether things are right or not. Like, is it the dad's fault? Whose fault is it? Is it the mum's fault? Is it the women? Is it the men? Is it this person? Is it the school? Is it like, so there's so much in there to unpack. And then you think, my suspicion is the people who are coming up with the ideas maybe haven't spent loads of time with 13-year-old boys. Do you know what I mean? Because if you had, you'd be like, this is probably not the best idea. Because they're crazy. Like they're like unregulated and they say what they think all the time and they don't understand long-term impact. They don't understand. Even in the show, again, right, you see this idea of like in that episode with Erin and where she's talking to Jamie about, does he understand what he's done means she's never coming back? Like there's no, you can't reverse it. Like it has an impact. And he's like, yeah, but she, but do you understand the impact? So how do you build that in young people? And I think that's like a pedagogy of change. It's a theory of change that like has to be implemented very carefully and structured and built. And you can't do that with a video. And videos are great resources. Like the feedback from the kids is always like, we want more videos. Right. So like you're always looking for resources. I think if they can clip it up and make it into something that we can use for specific conversations, that would be helpful. But yeah, I think we're looking at like a bigger reform of education before we're looking at like a quick solution. You know,
is it? Do you think? And I'm curious, everyone, to be honest, do you think that it's like a conversation that needs to happen just for teenage boys, or do you think like all young people in school need to be having this conversation collectively?
Yeah, I think there's different conversations for different people. That would be my opinion.
Okay.
I think from experience, I would say if you're in these classrooms and you have archetypical teenage boys in the classroom, the conversation cuts through and it resonates with them. But if you have boys who are on the margins of society for any reason, whether that's race, class, sexuality, gender identity, you've got trans kids in the classroom, like the conversation shifts and it becomes a different conversation because there's so much like careful handling that has to happen. It has to be very trauma-informed. You have to be looking at the experiences for working class kids. Conversations about power and privilege don't function in the same way.
For sure.
For black kids, for Asian kids, conversations about power and privilege don't function in the same way because they live in a different world to other people. And so I think the same for women and girls. One thing that they don't need to hear is masculinity is harmful, or like they know that. Do you know what I mean? Like the same way that we as black people understand whiteness in a different way to maybe how white people understand it. Sure. Women and girls understand masculinity in a different way to maybe the way that boys understand it, or men. And so I think there is conversations that need to happen. There are conversations about how society structures and imposes femininity on women and girls and polices their bodies and polices their expression and tells them what roles they're supposed to play and all of those kinds of things. But I don't think that's the same conversation. And I don't know if it always needs to happen in the same room. So I'm like quite a big advocate for like spaces and like curating spaces for specific ends, like to have specific conversations that lead to specific outcomes. So specific a lot of times, but I think that that's important. And so, in my opinion, I think it's important that we're having the conversation. I think I'm somebody who says a lot. It's important to have the conversation, but like which conversation specifically are you talking about? And how do you do that in a way that's safe and inclusive for everybody in the room, I think is the difficulty.
And there's a big conversation for parenting in this day and age. I think when we're talking about who we see ourselves as in this show, I mean, I'm not a father, but I'd most resonate with Jamie's father in the show.
Yeah.
Where you're kind of going through that reflection per episode of like, what was my role in this?
Yeah.
And I think there's episodes where they maybe hint that Jamie has a bit of like a streak of outbursts, and the therapist kind of hints at, was this from his father? And we don't explicitly get to the end of it, but we see hints of, he might have had a history of like acting out towards Jamie's mother or his sister. But then in the same episodes, we see like the streaks of him being a good father, and there's streaks of him caring and wanting to put certain things in place. So we kind of go to parents and we want them to think about how are we raising kids in this day and age. We go to like elder siblings, myself, I have younger siblings. And as I was saying earlier, I think when I was watching this show, I was thinking, what was my brother or my sisters being exposed to as they grew up? What do they like watch now? And like, what role do you have in terms of, I mean, can you control what they're exposed to? Can you control how they reflect about it? So there's so many conversations to be had. And you can even make an argument that adults have way more to take away from this than the children. So like putting it in schools maybe isn't the immediate best next step, because if you can't police or encourage what they're exposed to at home, then you might not have much of an impact. I mean, the teachers can get them to reflect about certain things, but if by the time they leave home, by the time they leave school and go home, they're then having, free reign to do whatever they want online, then maybe you haven't had much impact at all. So no, it's really, really nuanced.
I think a big worry of mine, right, about how we have these conversations, create the spaces, and particularly going back to what you were saying about we can't just throw teachers into the classroom with this video. As a facilitator myself, I recognize the value of a facilitator, right? To be in the space. We are important people. I don't think it's widely recognized as one, a profession, or two, a skill. Like facilitating a conversation, right? I think people are like, well, anyone could do that. We all have conversations all the time. So anyone can be thrown in, a teacher without training, a parent without training, anyone is just thrown in and expected to be able to navigate those trickier conversations. And one of the worries that I have is about the way that we have this conversation, particularly with young boys, can be incredibly divisive. Where they're
polarizing, man.
They're automatically, by virtue of being male, seen as like the enemy, and therefore get their backs up and are self-protective / defensive already about this, and being like, well, what's feminism? Girls are saying men are trash, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's girls bullying me. Like, even in Jamie's situation, right? That's what they kind of revert to. And one of my fears about it just being thrown out as like anyone can navigate this conversation is we end up dividing things more, where boys are now like even more like, well, just because I watched that video, what, men are bad? Like, I'm now, like, it's like we're almost perpetuating that.
Like, we've had loads of scenarios where we'll be in a school and it will be like a drop down day. So the kids are off timetable for the whole day, and they've got our session booked in for 2 hours. They've got a session with another organization, and then another 2-hour session with another organization. And so you get these kids at different times throughout the day. One group might be your first group. And then they'll go on to do the rest of the stuff. And sometimes you get kids at the end of the day, and they'll walk into the classroom and you can see that they're like, they don't want to be here anymore. Like, it's at the end of the day is difficult anyway, because it's graveyard shift. This lunch has just gone. They've like expended or like used all of their energy. They're like jacked up on sugar. And so they walk into this classroom and they clearly don't want to be there. And instead of like being like, my name's Ben, I'm from blah, 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 I'll be like, oh, where are you coming from? Like, how was lunch? Like, whatever, make some conversation. Then you'll ask them about what they've been doing for the rest of the day. And some of the feedback you hear about the rest of the sessions is very like damning. Do you know what I mean? It's like, oh, we were in this session with this organization and they just told us that we were wrong for an hour. Or like I asked a question and I got told to shut up or like whatever.
Yeah.
And I think actually what you're saying is true, right? Like the way that you have the conversation is equally, if not more important than the conversation that you're having. One of the things we try and train our facilitators in is like non-patriarchal approaches to conversation. So how do you have a conversation in a way where you're not, especially because for us as facilitators in a school, we're men and they're boys. Do you know what I mean? We're adults, we're bigger, we're stronger. We command more respect. We have more presence in the room. And so it's very easy to bully kids into changing their mind or agreeing with you or changing their opinion or threaten them with a detention so that they have stopped doing whatever. Or like, do you know what I mean? But how do you have a conversation in a way that removes all of those barriers and those boundaries and like where the method of communication is not punitive justice? Because I think that's so, if you're talking about patriarchy, you're talking about gender constructs, you're talking about masculinity, so much of what we learn, like you were saying about Ruben, right, is like men are protectors and they're disciplinarians and they take care of situations and they're the decision makers. So then how do you walk into a room with kids where you're asking them to deconstruct those norms but still using those norms to do the education? I think is so difficult. But that's like a real serious skill set. That's like, in my mind, I mean, I never want to compare myself to teachers because I think it's a different thing. And I think teachers are like the most overworked and under-resourced people, apart from like NHS workers in our society. I think it's a lot that they're dealing with. But I do think it's a serious skill set that deserves respect and also like requires expertise to be able to take yourself outside of yourself, because you can't count the amount of time somebody says something and you're like, that personally offends me. Like I'm actually upset by what you're saying. Like we had a workshop once where a kid was talking about making drop soap jokes about prison. And I was like, oh, it's so interesting. Like, I know people in prison. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't find it funny to like joke about guys that I know maybe being raped or sexually assaulted in them. But I get that when I was 14, I probably would have found that funny. So then you have to remove your own personal bias and like just use critical questioning to help them arrive at a good conclusion. But critical questioning is not time effective. It's like the least efficient way of having a conversation. Do you know what I mean? It takes so long to like build those blocks of understanding and help them think about things and question their own biases and like think about where, but it is a real skill set that kind of gets
particularly
neglected.
when you're saying like a lot of the time, even when you're going into these schools, it's for a drop down day. You've got like 1 hour, 90 minutes max to do a workshop. You ain't got time. Even in one of the most useful conversations, there's not time dedicated to doing it.
Yeah.
I think even stacking those sessions is the real problem. Because as a kid, like you're saying, it's not even so much that like by the end of the day, you're just tired. You're just not really taking much in. And you're thinking, well, we've got 2 more hours and then we're getting
I just got to get through it. Yeah.
And to you, it was a non-school uniform day. We didn't have science. You didn't have English. So it's also about how kids like perceive these days. Obviously, the curriculums and the things scheduled might be great, but are these the best ways to have these conversations? Like, is it more effective if actually they have a normal school day and every so often they have like a really important 2-hour talk about something else, rather than like have all of these in one day and then all the conversations merge into one, like nothing's really.
Also, when it's a one-off, from a school, from my like when Ben's organization came in, I was like, this is like I was in one. I think I might have been in your room. I might have actually been in your room, but I was like, this is great. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, it's only probably going to happen once, and that's a shame. So I don't have the solution to that, But the fact that the conversation is so important, that we pay the money, we get the people in, and then some schools do essentially tick the box and say, well, we had the session for the year 9 boys. Okay, cool, but your teenage experience changes when you become sexually active, for example, when you become 15, 16, whatever age. And also when you're 12, you should be having these should be punctuated throughout your teenage. It should be embedded. But then how that happens, I don't have the answer. Like you were saying about education reform, if it is the schools, because that's the easiest way to create a controlled systemic change, we think, what's the one place that all young people are going to be in at some point? It's education, it's in the schools. So if that's a solution, fine. But it's not a case of, you just bring the organization in and tick the box. It's a curriculum thing. It's it's a big piece of work I don't have the answers to, but
because they spend a lot of time, a significant amount of time studying Shakespeare. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like there's a lot, bro. I remember, and I'm so like, true, not even to say Shakespeare's not valuable, because I think for all young people it's important that they know the heritage and the history of the country that they live in. And I think there's something important about expanding your mind and understanding like worlds that have been built by people and what the possibilities are with imagination. I think there's value in those lessons, but I think maybe we're reaching the point where the time distributed to specific conversations is not equitable. It's not in terms of like the society we want to build.
Well, this is it, right? It's about what's the purpose of education in the first place, right? Is it to prepare you for the world, or is it to get you to pass a test?
Yeah,
that's the thing.
Yeah.
I'm curious about, I suppose, one, the way forward, because I know you've spoken about we need to have specific conversations for specific people, but handled in a specific way. So what do you think that looks like holistically in terms of rolling something like that out, particularly given time limitations and training limitations, and even like there's not enough facilitators really to cover the whole country to do that long term. So what does that look like? Like what's the right way to do it? But then also, what does it look like beyond just school? Because yes, there are teenage boys that we need to reach, but there are grown men that we need to reach too.
Yeah. Well, let's get the country out of austerity. That would be good. That would be a good start. Let's reopen some youth clubs. Let's get some youth provisions going. I think parenting courses are going to be very important in the coming years. I think there's going to have to be, because one of the big problems, I think, is people are talking about role models all the time. We need more role models. We need more role models. But like, I think there's also like a fundamental misunderstanding of like being a present father to your child doesn't mean you're not misogynistic. It doesn't mean you're not sexist. It doesn't mean you're not racist. It doesn't mean you're not homophobic. So all of these things like don't necessarily get solved by just having someone there. And I think having someone there is nice and it's important. Or it's fundamentally important. It's not a nice thing to have. Like it's really, really important. But I think also like there's got to be time and space for parents, for adults to work through their own assumptions about gender and about masculinities as well. Like you're putting so much pressure on teachers, on educators, on parents, but like we all grew up in the same environment. We all had the same sex ed, if we had any at all. We all had the same PSHE, if we had any at all. And it didn't cover all of the stuff that we're dealing with or struggling with now as a society. So how do we embed that? I think is going to be important. I think there's going to have to be initiatives, big teacher training initiatives. And I don't know how that's going to work because everybody's up against it. Like everybody's like against the time constraint. Teachers, like we're fighting for like 45-minute twilight sessions. Do you know what I mean? Like teachers are, and they're tired. Like you've been working since 8:30 in the morning, 8 a.m. in the morning, and it's now 6:30. And then we're saying, oh, come in for this session. Nobody wants to be there. So how do you like bolster teacher training in a way that maybe touches on at the start, like maybe gets them before they're even in the school to do these pieces of reflection on their own role and what influence and impact they can have on the young people around them based on their beliefs. And I think there's also probably going to have to be some kind of conversation about people being fit for service, being like actually able to do the job that we're asking them to do. Because I think at the moment, teaching is a bit of like we've relegated it to like a second or third class career in our society. And it's like if you can't do, teach, like as opposed to like, this is an incredible skill set. And you're literally like performing alchemy with these children. Like you're helping them to understand things that they did not understand before. So I think there's got to be some respect around that. But man, it's a big thing. And I'm not like an educational, I don't even know the word that I'm looking for here, but like I'm not a politician who's trying to change education. Do you know what I mean? I'm trying to run these workshops with these boys and help them understand. But I think one of the things we're going to have to see is like joint working and like partnerships between social services and local government and education provisions and parents and teachers and educators all coming together to have conversations about what this can look like. Because we're all within a constraint, right? We're all within a system that functions in a specific way for a specific end or for a specific purpose. But I do think if we can start generating more spaces or generating more conversation from these spaces, then maybe we can figure it out. I think one of the things we do all the time is like reinvent the wheel. You know, like there'll be like there's other organizations coming up now. Our organizations that existed for a decade now, and over that decade, we've learned so much about what it means to have these conversations intersectionally, what it means to have these conversations taking into account people's identities, what it means to care for the facilitators who are running these conversations and the impact it's having on them, and how you support them to be able to turn up to work as full people. There are so many things that like you learn over time, and nobody shares best practice. So like people start an organization today and 10 years from now, they'll be in the same position we're in now because we won't tell them and they won't ask us. So actually, I think we've got to do a lot more sharing of like what it looks like when things actually work and learn from those models. But conversations about masculinity, conversations about gender-based violence, conversations about sex and sexuality, conversations about emotional literacy are going to be super important. I think is it Jordan Stevens that's been talking a lot recently about.
He's everywhere as well.
He's outside, bro. He's outside. But I think he's been talking a lot about like his belief. The way I understand it is that everything links back to emotional regulation. And I don't know if I 100% agree with that, but I do think clearly there are some links between men's violence against men. Let's start with that. Men's violence against women and girls. Men's violence against themselves. Like we know that suicide is the leading cause of death for men under the age of 45 in the UK. So all of these things are linked to how we deal with and process difficult emotions. And we don't give enough time or space for that conversation. So I think there's got to be more conversations about that. I think there's got to be more reflective spaces. I think there's got to be more like mindfulness sessions and like helping kids to tap into like not just the ideas, but like the actual practice of regulating themselves. But the school environment doesn't support regulation. Do you know what I mean? Like again, in Adolescence, we saw when the police officers walk through the school, it's literally teachers screaming at kids, like losing their shit all the time. I know. And I thought I would love to hear your opinion on this, because I thought like when I was watching it, I was like, I don't know how they've figured this out. Like I don't know, other than being a external educator in a school and like walking into and out of 100 schools in a year, I don't know how you can realize that that's what it looks like when you walk in. And I think some of it is like hyperbolic. I think some of it is exaggerated. But for me, for the most part, it was very, very accurate. Like when I saw it, I was like, oh wow, this is like literally my experience 3 times a week walking into schools.
Yeah, that pains me to hear it though.
Yeah, it's horrible.
It does pain me. It's one of those things, because I was speaking about it typing on Twitter about it.
As you do.
Just think about the accuracy of the depiction of the school environment. And then there's a lot of people from my perspective being like, I get it's been dramatized. I get that. Yeah. However, when I was looking, I was saying, right, but this is supposed to be it's a serious drama that we're supposed to be taking seriously. So I was looking for a depiction of a school that through my lens, I thought was realistic. Yeah. However, I'm aware that there are schools where things are unruly and teachers do shout and blah, 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 and there are massive gaps in safeguarding protocols and blah, blah, blah. But I was hoping that they would at least try. Like, I didn't feel like you needed the chaotic school environment to
emphasize.
I feel like you could have had, I feel like you could have had a more controlled, more safe feeling school environment, and still said it happens in these schools too. Do you know what I mean? You don't need to have a chaotic school environment for kids to generate these feelings or bullying happens everywhere. Young boys have feelings of hatred towards themselves and others in every school. But I think from a teacher's perspective, I looked and I thought this was over dramatized to the point where I started to look at it and be like, this isn't even that realistic. And lost sight of it. Say again, sorry?
Do you think it would have been a stronger point then for them to show that this situation stemmed from a quote unquote well-controlled school? Do you think that would have been a stronger point?
Potentially, I feel like I just wouldn't have been a detractor. It was a detractor for me when I was watching it, but only because I work in schools.
Yeah.
But
it wasn't like the school that you were working in.
No,
when
not
I
at all.
was in.
No.
It was very different. Like that, but that school was one of the most controlled school environments I've ever been in.
But what's interesting is, similar to Ben, having been in thousands of schools, I watched that as someone who's seen loads of schools. I was like,
That's correct.
No, I don't just. The thing is,
like that's in school.
It does.
And then I'm
happen.
hearing from teachers be like, "That's not a school." I'm like, "But that's not your
What school do you work in?
Yeah, indeed.
I want to work. I want to go facilitate in that school.
Yeah.
There are definitely schools where it is that level of chaos.
Yeah.
However, I don't know. I don't know. Like maybe because I can't detract myself, and I need to acknowledge the lens that I'm watching it through. Because I'm watching it through a lens of someone who creates and works and tries to build schools that look nothing like that.
Yeah.
However, one thing I want to come back to when you were speaking before about how do we change this and blah, blah, blah. And the thing about parenting.
Not and bloody blah.
Yeah. How do you just change?
All we heard was blah.
No disrespect intended. But sorry, I should put my words better. But how do we change this? Full stop. And parenting is one of those. Parenting is literally the most important job that no one ever trains you for.
Yeah.
No one trains you for it. You just figure it out.
Yeah.
And until
teachers signed up to do it.
Well, indeed, but that's the thing. Well, teachers are the quasi. I never know if it's quasi or quasi. I don't know. Quasi. I'm going to go crazy. Quasi. I don't know. I'm going to go quasi.
Quasi.
Just a quasi.
Quasi. Yeah.
But either way,
make the point.
there needs to be in an ideal world. If I could snap my fingers, I would go for very close to mandatory parenting courses.
For everybody.
For everyone. For everyone. If I could snap my fingers, people need, the moment you become responsible for rearing and raising and the influence that you now have on a young person, until I feel like everyone needs to interrogate their own humanity, so to speak, where you are now. And you need to be able to interrogate it and think, there's a phrase I remember seeing on social media about, am I being the person that I want my child to become? Like, am I conducting myself in the way that I want my child to be when they become an adult? Chances are no, because I still have flaws.
I'm still working it out.
So you parents or adults, before you or as you raise children, you need to have a space to be like, I'm grappling with some stuff now, and I'm trying to now prevent, hopefully, my child from making the same mistakes, having the same views or the same whatever biases that I currently have, because I know they haven't been good for me.
Yeah.
So if I could snap my fingers, I know it's not possible to have every parent I imagine it's not possible. But that's one thing that if we could, that could have a massive impact as long as it's been led by people who've also...
Right. But being facilitated correctly. Because I think...
Who's going to run that?
Because...
Who's the best parent?
Because it's not like and it's not like even the idea of like the word course, I think evokes negative feelings in people, because people are, I don't want to be told how to look after my own kids. But I think there's so much value in like being in a session for a couple of hours and learning about the brain development of a child. Like what happens, people say, oh, it's formative years, and like what happens in those years that's important? What are the like key touch points? What are the key markers of development? How do you nurture those things? And I think when you give that to people, most people, not all people, but most people will arrive at good conclusions by themselves.
I find being a first-time parent myself, I find that there's so much that you don't even think about until you become a parent.
Until the moment hits.
But then you also don't know about developmental stages unless you know other people
who will tell you about it. Yeah.
And because my mum, she works in an after-school club, and she will often tell me, like, I know for a fact that this parent doesn't know any other parents because their child is doing X, but they should be doing this.
Yeah.
At this age, they should be asking this.
Yeah.
But because they don't have any other benchmark to sort of go by,
the
parent doesn't know. And I think so many parents operate in like our own singular spaces.
Oh, that.
And like, maybe not a course, but even just a conversation between parents.
Just get together.
Something.
It needs something that would make an impact. Obviously, it wouldn't be immediate impact, but if that was the society, if we wanted to really create a society that was going to make tomorrow's society better, you need to start improving who we are right now.
Whilst we're talking about parenting, I'm going to be Mr. Segway a little bit.
That is a strong one,
Come on. I'm going to steal that name, you know. Pastor Segway. That's my new name. I want to come onto like the role of particularly dads in parenting boys. And I only say that, not to say that other parents are not valid, but as a dad myself, I'm curious, and I know you're a dad. What do you think that dads particularly need to be aware of in the relationship they have with sons? And I say that because we're talking about adolescence, and particularly the last scene of Adolescence. Everyone talks about that being extremely powerful, right? Where Stephen Graham's sort of like crying into or tucking in the teddy bear in his son's room and crying into the pillow. and he's almost like, how did that come from me?
Yeah.
But he also talks about his own relationship to his own dad.
Where he was getting beaten. Yeah, he was getting absolutely battered by his dad. Yeah.
What sort of any thoughts or advice?
Man, it's a good question. Like, I mean, I am not, my partner has a daughter. I'm like a quasi stepdad at this point, right? So like, but my young person is 22, so barely a young person anymore. And I didn't go through those formative stages of parenting where it's like, oh, well, this is how you raise, this is how you teach, this is how you teach them how to wash their genitals or any of that kind of stuff. I missed all of those bits. So I don't know about that stuff. But for me, I don't know why that sticks out as the most important thing as well, but it's important. It's health, cleanliness.
It is, but all the things.
This is fundamentally important. You don't want to raise a dirty kid. But I guess for me, like, the question would be, maybe there's a reflective question that might be helpful, which is like, if we think about what did we learn from our dads when we were young about what it meant to be a man? Like, in terms of that idea of like, what does, am I being the person that I want my young person to end up being? Like, what did you learn from your dad about masculinity? Maybe is a good question to start with.
Yeah. I can't tell if you're asking me that question.
Yeah, no, I am asking.
Oh, wow.
Open question.
I think for me is before I started university, I had a conversation with, well, not my biological father, but kind of who my mum's with now, who's been a father figure in my life, like since I moved to the UK. But yeah, the conversation was basically, it was in Luganda, my native tongue, but to paraphrase, he was basically saying, you can actually tolerate people kind of saying negative things or saying things you don't necessarily agree with. And that can actually be, that can be fine until it starts to stop you from trying to get to where you're getting to.
Right.
And that's when you have to say something.
Yeah.
So he was basically telling me that you're going to be in an environment where like you're going to have a lot of people maybe like getting in your way or people kind of picking on you or saying things you don't necessarily...
Two cents in.
Yeah. And like you don't have to, you shouldn't engage with every single thing because it can be tempting to, he said, but the very moment where someone's actively doing something and you can see it gets in your way or prevents you from kind of progressing towards something you want to or need to, that's when you have to say, that's when it's non-negotiable. And I think that's kind of, it was a valid lesson for me because I then kind of went about uni picking my battles, so to speak. Which some people might disagree with, and some people might say that you need to actually speak up about everything. But I actually found it quite valuable for me to try and reflect on when it was important to use your energy and when it was actually like, you know what, I realized this, but let me just step to my own because you know you're annoying me, but you're not really stopping me from doing anything right now.
And so, like, so important, just to start before you two go, like, so important. Number one there is like the importance of actual present, like active conversation, like actually saying something. Like, I had a dad who just didn't say anything. Like, in the home, he was very present. He was always there, but he's not a talker. And so he never, there was no moment where he was like, apart from like, make sure you sign up to the pension, make sure you take out a bank account with HSBC. Like, there were very specific things where it was like, do this. And it was an instruction. It wasn't a conversation. But like that importance of conversation and like actually giving guidance, number one. And then number two, like something really interesting for me around like conflict. And because it wasn't until I was in my early 30s that I was at work and I had to go through mediation because I was terrible at managing conflict. Still, I'm not great at managing conflict. But like, what does it look like if you're a conflict avoidant person? How do you pick your battles? Because otherwise you just have to figure that stuff out yourself. And like, if you're raising kids, like how do you teach your kids about which conflicts are important, which when to fight, when to not fight? Is violence the answer? Like, how do you resolve problems? If you've got a problem with someone, how do you talk through it? How do you model that and how do you create spaces for them to practice it? Sounds super important. But I don't know if for you guys, like for me, the things I learned from my dad were like, men always go to work. It's very important. Like every day they go to work. They never take time off sick. Unless they've got like actual man flu or need an operation. Because man flu is a real thing. I know people like piss on man flu, but it is like, it's worse than regular flu. Talk about that another time. But also that like men always read the newspaper was like very important, and that they always get a big bit of chicken was like these were just things that I picked up as a kid when I was watching my dad.
Watch, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm sitting there going, I don't remember being told anything.
Nah,
it's
nothing.
more what you observe, and then you
some
therefore
lessons
go.
you just pick up.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Go, maybe that's what.
Yeah, this is how I'm meant to do it.
I don't know how much of the things I picked up were just to do with being a good human and whether the sex, so to speak, was incidental. So when I think about, when you asked the question, I was like racking my brain being like, what did I pick up from my dad? And how much of it was actually about him being a man, or how much of it was just him being a human being that I just related to because he was my dad. So and I'm leaning more towards, I picked up things about just how to carry yourself as a good human. And for me, I don't remember consciously, obviously that's the thing until I start to interrogate it, I don't remember consciously attributing those to being what men do, as opposed to just, this is what it means to be a good family person. Because he's very family orientated, he's very kind, he's respectful, like he shows up. And I haven't consciously said, well, that's what men do. Well, I don't think I have anyway. But then when I'm trying to carry myself and my family now, I'm trying to do the same things, but I still don't know if I'm doing that because I think I need to do it as a man, or am I doing it just because I think I just need to be a good human, and the father in the manhood thing is incidental because I have no choice. My sex is male, it's not going to change.
But then you can ask, is the distinction that important?
No, I don't think it is.
That's
what I'm saying. I feel like for me personally, I think the sex is in the way I'm trying, what I've learned and how I'm carrying myself now. I feel like my sex is incidental because that's just, and then we all know gender's a construct anyway. So the whole idea of what it means to be a man is by the by, because it's whatever it is.
It changes. Different for different people.
Exactly. So I think from my dad, I've just picked up what it means to be what I've seen as an upstanding human, because everyone speaks highly of him. So whatever he's doing, clearly people think is a good thing to do. So I'm going to try and do that stuff so people think highly of me as well.
That's an interesting one, right? That idea of being respected. Like how do you gain respect from people? Like what's the route to respect? Because I think respect again is something, as a kid growing into an adult, it's something that everybody wants. Like everyone wants to be respected. So maybe there's something important about how as fathers we can role model what it looks like to get respect from people. Because some people get respect by punching people in the face, right? Like it's not my way, but like for some people that is their vibe. And then if you do that around kids, then that's what the kids learn about how to get respect. So anytime they feel disrespected, that's what they go to. But maybe there's different options there. I don't know. I don't know what was.
I've got so many reflections. I'm just here going like, because it's so interesting what I've picked up versus like what I've picked up just by being there, observing my dad. Because I can't think of any sitting down lessons. But where did I get the idea of, is that, and I'm really thinking about what you said, is this about being a good person? Is this about being a good man? And then what you said the other day has been playing on my mind, because I'd never thought of it this way, masculinities rather than masculinity, right? There's so many different options, you know? And the way that I present myself in the world, but I'm so conscious.
Of time?
No, not even yet. I'm just conscious, bruv. No, I'm conscious of my role as a father, and I think I'm quite consciously parenting my son. In a way where I'm like, I want you to know this is how your dad is or was. And this is what I think I want you to understand about being a good person / man in the world. In a different way to, I don't think my dad did that. I don't know. I doubt that my dad sat around thinking about this.
Intentionally.
And I doubt he had any conversations with any of his boys about that, to be honest. But I know that for me, it's quite a conscious thing. Like, what do I want you to take from me and the way that I'm being? But why am I doing that when I don't know what I really got from my dad, other than watching what I think worked with, in terms of like the strengths and also the failures, and watching where I think my dad went through things and failed but learnt things, and I'm taking those lessons. Be like, that's what it means to be a man. You know?
We were at yours the other day for Ruben's birthday. And Vicky, when we left, her observation was Bilal is so regulated. Which I thought was really interesting, because I was like, no, he's not. No, I'm joking. No, you are quite like, you are a pretty regulated person, but like she was like, impressed is the wrong word, but she wouldn't stop talking about like how important it was like to see what you were doing for Ruben and like what you're showing him about the ways that people relate to other people, the ways that they hold space for other people. And I think actually like so much of this stuff is like, this is the thing that comes back to this idea of a parenting course, right? It's like, I don't think the answer is actually telling people a checklist of things that they have to achieve while they're parenting. I think it is about people actually sitting down and reflecting for themselves about like, what is it that I learned? How did I learn it? Did I like that I learned that? Or did it help me or did it hinder me? And therefore, what do I want to pass on? Because as parents, like we all gonna make mistakes. Do you know what I mean? Like there's no way you can like not fuck up a kid. Like they're gonna have their own shit and they're gonna like go to therapy and chat shit about you. And that's just the game. Like it's just the way it goes, right? But like in that process, I do think we have loads of options about like which things we want to show and which things we want to model. And I think another thing that's really important for me on a personal level is like fallibility and vulnerability. So like making mistakes, and as a dad, being good at apologizing for making those mistakes so that your son knows I can make mistakes. And when I make mistakes, all that needs to happen is I need to be accountable and apologize. Because I think that's a big thing culturally with men that seems to be missing at this point, right? Like, it's like, how do we show up and take accountability for the things that we get wrong? And there's not any systems outside of like, send him to prison that exist to show. So everybody just avoids making mistakes or hides the mistakes that they make rather than admitting it, holding your hands up and being like, oh yeah, I fucked it. Like I need to change this or I need to do this differently and I won't do this to make sure it doesn't happen again. So for me, that would be like a big thing. But
that might be most people's biggest gripe with their parents. Is that like, I don't know many people that can say that during my childhood, my parents actively said, yeah, no, I got that one wrong.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Like,
it's true.
I can speak for myself. I don't
I know for certain my wife is listening to this because the amount of conversations we have about why don't you just take accountability and just I'm struggling and she's literally gonna be listening, smirking, looking at me, being like, I'm telling you to take accountability, you need to learn it. I'm like, yeah, it's flipping difficult.
Yes, hard.
I don't know why it is. But I need to think about why I'm wired in a way that I can't just be like, you know what? Yeah, I messed up. And but now that I've recognized it after the umpteen time that she's made the reference to it, I now have to deliberately and intentionally, when I've made a mistake, be like, don't try and like weasel out of it. Don't try and like explain it away. Don't try and like deflect it. Just be accountable.
I had the situation.
And I need to start. She's going to be like, yeah, try now. And I'm like, yeah, babe, I'm trying.
And that's all you can do is try, right? Like, and it's not like you're just going to get it perfect, but the trying, I think, is where the value is. And for kids seeing that, fundamentally important.
Like, I had a situation over there. I had to apologize to Ruben.
Yeah.
Because it was so funny. Because I told him off for like spilling something all over the floor. Because he's 4 and he does that. And then literally about an hour later, I did exactly the same thing. And then he was looking at me like,
who's going to tell you off then?
Yeah. And I was like, it's just an accident. And he was like, yeah, but daddy, you shouldn't have done. And I was like, do you know what, Ruben? I'm really sorry for telling you off because actually people just make mistakes and that was a mistake. You dropped it, I dropped it. I should never have told you off.
Yeah.
Because he was looking at me being like, hold on, who's coming round to tell you off? Because he was like, grandma ain't here, granddad. Like,
somebody needs to tell you about yourself.
Yeah, but I was like, I actually need to, one, watch myself with what I'm telling him off for, but also show him that I can apologize to you as well. Like I can say sorry to you.
Yeah.
So that you learn to say sorry to me and other people as well. I am conscious of time, but I actually do have 2 more questions. Do people mind?
No, go for it.
One of them is a group question, which is to do with like whether this is a big problem in the first place, right? This concept of, and I know the answer is yes, but it's a long-winded way of getting into this, that sexism is a huge problem, but whether things are blown out of proportion in regards to what's counted as sexism. So when you were talking the other day, you mentioned a woman called Laura Bates. I'd never heard of her before. So
Shout out to Laura.
Thank you for bringing her to my attention, because I then went and watched a TEDx talk called Everyday Sexism by Laura Bates. And she was talking about examples of like literal, like countless examples of mostly uni student women talk about their experience of everyday sexism and watched or heard from or experienced themselves from men on their campuses. And so many of the things that she mentioned, I was like, I saw that at Cambridge.
Yeah.
Like I saw worse things
Yeah.
at Cambridge. You know, they would talk about things like drinking society initiations where a man would put a bottle between his crotch and a woman would have to drink out of that bottle.
Yeah.
Or getting into sex positions, and if they didn't do it, the women were like ostracized from the group during their freshers week. And all of these sort of things, I was like, I swear I saw this stuff in my own freshers. And I wanted to ask you guys firstly if you saw things in your own freshers or just time at uni. And then also this concept of like, what does everyday sexism look like for boys? So yeah, any reflections?
I'm racking my brain.
Bro, do you know why it's a difficult question? Yeah. And this is one of the things that I've learned over this time doing this work, is that the way that privilege and the way that power function is one of the key things about them, is that they insulate us from experiences that are not our own experiences. So for us as guys, like for me, when I started doing this work, I pretended to read loads of books. I didn't actually make it through loads of books, but Everyday Sexism was one of the books that I did read a couple of chapters of, because it shifted for me that understanding of like the conversations that women are having about stuff that's happening to them that we just never see. Like we just don't know that it exists. Like, and it's not because we are being horrible. It's not because it's like we're all agents of the patriarchy and we're tapped in and we're maintaining systems of powers, but the way that the power functions means that like we will never know the degradation or the humiliation of like having to kneel down and drink a drink from a man's crotch. And so as a man, you wouldn't see that as like, if you were doing that at uni, you wouldn't look back at it and be like, oh yeah, I did do that and that was really bad, unless somebody pointed out to you that maybe that had an impact beyond what you understood at that moment. And so I think like when you're talking about everyday sexism, it's so difficult to pick out the moments, because it's things like, oh, we're in the club and my boy like grabs a girl's hand and tries to chat to her and she's like, get off, and walks away. And for us, we're like, oh, it was just an interaction. Like he tried to chat to her, she didn't want to chat. But for her, she might go to the toilet and be absolutely rattled and never go back to that club again because she feels like she's been harassed. And you might not even interpret that as harassment. Do you know what I mean? I think there's so many of those kinds of examples of things that are like so difficult as a guy to put your finger on, unless a woman in your life has told you that thing is negative, that it actually has a harmful impact. So I don't know what I don't know what you guys are going to say. I'm sure there are loads of examples, but it's so hard to like pick them out.
Yeah, I can't think.
I mean, those types of like clubbing interactions that you mentioned, like you see them quite a lot. I think I was protected in freshers because I didn't drink when I started university.
It's a good strategy.
So naturally I wasn't in loads of initiations for like drinking societies and that kind of thing. But even things like, you know, going out and seeing that kind of thing on a night out, again, interactions that you don't perceive as potentially harmful. I mean, that happens beyond university, really. For sure. I'm sure on many nights out in the country that happens like multiple times. So I think these things do kind of perpetuate, and yeah, it is a point of privilege to not register these things all the way through, but they happen. And
because it got me thinking about, you know, when these things are just so normalized that they happen and people don't even perceive that what they're doing was wrong. And then they continue that behavior. Because nobody's questioning it. They haven't even questioned it. They've not even really thought about it. Why would you?
It's just the way it works.
Right. And then you end up as a CEO, or you end up later down the line in life, no, you're still doing the same things because you thought that was okay. And then allegations come out and then you get questioned and then all of these things. But actually, along the way, there was never any like course correction in the first place. There's never any real understanding. And I was just thinking about boys today in school, where on the one hand, there's like this, as I was saying earlier, about this problem of we don't want to demonize them, but then also like the lack of understanding as to what you're doing in the first place, or what you're saying towards women and girls being sexist or everyday sexism because of the perception of it. And then you grow up and you still think those things are okay because there wasn't any course correction in the first place.
Yeah, that's because a lot of boys and men don't hold one another accountable. We don't. Like, we just kind of go along with it. We just think it's funny, or like, even if we know it's wrong, the thing to do at the moment isn't to challenge a boy on it and say, no, you stepped out of line. Instead, we just kind of laugh and disapprove in silence. It's like tacit disapproval as opposed to especially growing up when you're a teenager.
Yeah,
there's a lot of
man.
tacit disapproval as opposed to actually saying, nah,
What's
do you know
tacit
what?
mean?
Just like silent.
Latent.
Yeah, like we know it's wrong. What the thing they're saying, the thing they're doing, we're like, actually, that's not the right thing to do. So it could be the hand, like, it could be something as subtle. I say
You'd be like,
it's not even subtle.
This guy, man.
Yeah,
you're just, you wouldn't challenge.
You wouldn't challenge it.
Yeah.
Even if it was something like, for example, trying to chat to a girl, not by actually trying to have a conversation, instead feeling entitled enough to make physical contact and bring her towards you. Like, we can reflect, but like, actually, no, that's not the right way to go about it. But would we have said anything about it at the time? Nah, we would have just laughed when it got rejected.
Yeah.
And instead of interrogating, you probably got rejected because you invaded her personal space without her consent, and felt entitled enough to bring her towards you, like do you know what I mean? But we don't.
You're not looking for the deeper meaning
we
of
don't.
the objectification or the ownership. And it's, you know what, one of the things that we talk about a lot in workshops is this idea of intention versus impact, and how I think for lots of boys, the reason that we don't call each other out, or for lots of men also, the reason that we don't call each other out is because we believe we understand the intention. And so if the intention isn't to harm, whether harm is caused or not, is neither here nor there, because he didn't mean to do that thing. It's like the same as when your wife is challenging you about something and you're like, I didn't mean it, as though that kind of excuses you from the consequence of the harm that's been caused. But I think actually there's got to be some work done to build people's understanding of impact. And I think that's a language that people can understand. Maybe not actually impact, but like what actually happened because you did that thing. And learning to sit with that, which is uncomfortable. But I think the other part of it is that there are so many rules, and this is where it turns into a big society conversation, because when you're talking about normalization, the reason that these things happen is because the rules of engagement dictate that that's what's supposed to happen. So if the rules of engagement, let's talk about dating, for example, the rules of engagement dictate that men are the pursuers and women are the people that are pursued. And the rules of engagement dictate that women like confident men, and they like men who will make the first move, and that women don't want to make the first move when they're attracted to men. So all men grow up knowing, or all boys grow up knowing, I'm supposed to chat to her. I'm supposed to have lines. I'm supposed to get her attention. If she says no, I'm not supposed to take no for an answer, because they want us to be persistent. They want us to try again. And that's a really difficult set of rules to understand when you're young. It's a really difficult set of rules to understand at any point. But then actually, those rules are based in something that is patriarchal, something that's quite inherently misogynistic. Like the idea that women can't make up their own minds. They need to be persuaded. Like men's role is to be the persuader. Men are the decision makers. They choose the partner, and the women are lucky to be chosen. All of those things like become normalized into a situation where it leads to loads of sexual harassment in clubs, because guys are just trying to do what they've been told they're supposed to do, and girls don't feel confident or comfortable to challenge them, especially now because they're worried they're going to get punched in the face. So then how do you create new lines and new boundaries? And I don't think the right way to do it is always, like, I think part of it is explaining and breaking down those systems and like the ways that we kind of get these ideologies and how things work. But I think another part of it is like learning to understand, actually, sometimes when I do X, the impact is Y, and I don't want to have that impact in the world, so I'm just going to stop doing X. And that might mean that you're not the guy that moves to all the girls anymore, and that's not a big part of your personality. That was something that you were celebrated for when you were in university, but like maybe that actually needs to change because of the impact. But it's complicated. Like it's a lot to think about. And I it's not stuff that I think people naturally arrive at. Do you know what I mean? Like I feel like I wouldn't understand it unless somebody had sat there and broke it down to me, and I'd been like, oh, I get it. And once I got it, I was like, oh, so I'll just stop doing that then. Like that's obviously having a negative impact, and I don't want to do that. And then I think there's also bad actors, which is a different conversation. Like people who actually want to cause harm and maybe need a different form of intervention.
For sure. I got one final question on this, right? Because now I'm conscious of time. And this framework of like accountability and men and boys holding each other to account for their behavior. How does forgiveness and growth and change fit into that? Because we hold men and boys to account, and someone holds their hands up and they go, you're right, I've not even thought about that. I'm self-reflecting, I got that wrong. You challenge me, I'm wrong, Is there scope for forgiveness and like truly accepting that people did wrong and can change and can learn in the society that we're in today, where people are being held to account for historical wrongs where maybe there was a lack of understanding in the first place?
Boy. That's a big question, brother. I don't know the answer.
Yeah.
For a lot of things, people also need to kind of live with not being absolved of like their impact. I think often when we talk about forgiveness and that kind of thing, it's a great idea because, you know, in theory, you do something, it causes a negative impact. You come up with an apology and, you know, the person who it negatively impacted says, oh yeah, it's cool. You're forgiven and then you're absolved and life goes on. But I actually think people probably deep their actions more if you then turn to the person and like, you know what? Nah, I felt horrible when you did that and I'm not going to forgive you. I'm just going to keep my distance.
Yeah.
But I appreciate that you came forward and took responsibility. And that's that. And I think people kind of need to live with that a bit more. Like you're not going to be absolved of every action. And that's the reality of it.
Yeah. But I suppose in that, like the justice is served there, but it doesn't need to go further. Like the justice is served in that.
I think so, especially for things where I guess that kind of is the sphere they'll operate in. Like it's just an interaction between two people and they either choose to accept that apology or not. I don't know if I'm making sense, but I think we shouldn't only apologize in the hope that it's going to lead to a forgiveness, an absolution, because that,
the teacher in me wants us to define our terms. How are we defining forgiveness?
Well,
as
like
in when you forgive someone, what does it mean? Because we use it all the time.
Yeah.
And people use it fleetingly and people say, oh, you're forgiven. But what does it mean? Because until we define those terms and we're on the same page, I can't talk about this because
Ben went Bible college.
Yeah. But it does have, obviously it's got religious.
I don't remember the answers.
But like true forgiveness does that, and I'm asking the question, does it mean you no longer hold the mistake or the fault honestly and truthfully against that person anymore? Like what? Like that's what I'm saying, because for that, I don't think that's possible sometimes.
Yeah.
Or that you're happy to put out in the world that you don't hold it against that person anymore. And I think it's that some people aren't happy to actively say they no longer hold it against you, and that's okay. Like, as in, you should be...
It's the acceptance of wrong, but I no longer hold it against you.
Is that what we're saying, forgiveness? Acceptance, so I accept you've done something wrong, but I no longer hold it against you.
Yeah, and I think you should be...
And that's clear now.
But you can't... I don't feel like you can... When you say the words, I forgive you, I feel like you don't, in that moment, forget... Like, I feel like it takes time.
Well, I mean, ultimately, these are all phrases, right? I think people should just be... People should just acknowledge that you still need to be able to take responsibility without the other person being like, I accept this, and you've been like...
Yeah. It doesn't require somebody telling you that you were wrong to accept that you were wrong.
Yeah, or like telling you that they acknowledge it and like bygones have been bygones. Like you don't need to hang on to that to be able to take responsibility.
For me, I think where forgiveness lands is... Because I think there's two worlds, which is like an emotional world and a tangible world, or I don't know what the other word is for the other world, but there's the emotional aspect, which I think is like everybody's entitled to their own emotions and you're allowed to feel what you feel and work through what you feel or not work through what you feel, right? So somebody that Bilal does something wrong to me and emotionally it's hurt me, it's upset me, it's made me angry, it's made me frustrated. I choose about whether I deal with those emotions or not. I think forgiveness is a different thing, which is like it doesn't relieve that emotional burden that I'm carrying, but it does say, all right, now I'm making a commitment. We've reached a point where when you say not holding it against you, I'm no longer going to treat you as though that's what you did. Or I'm no longer going to dish out punishment to you based on the action that you did that hurt me, because I've forgiven you. And I might still feel shit about it. I might still feel hurt or upset or frustrated and still need to work through that stuff. Yeah. But the commitment there is about how I treat you in my mind, or like how I speak about you in front of other people. So do I say I forgive you and then go and chat shit about you to everyone else? Or do I go and drag you through the mud elsewhere? Or do I blacklist you? Because if I've forgiven you, then it wouldn't be that. But I might still feel the difficult emotions. And I think we're all on this spectrum also that's difficult, because when it's personal, like if it's like a family member, for example, or someone we love, someone we care about, and they do something wrong, if it doesn't impact us, it might be easier for us to forgive them, and we will bring, like, you know, in court they do like character references, and they're like, this is a person of good standing, and they do blah 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 in the community. Like, I think actually most of us wanna forgive people. We don't want people to go through difficult consequences for their actions, but then some people do want that. Do you know what I mean? Some people do want, and that's what they consider to be justice. They consider it to be fair, that you took X away from me, so I'm going to take X away from you.
Yeah.
But I think that's a difficult thing, because then there's also frameworks of restorative justice that exist, right? Like where there are families who have had loved ones murdered, and they're able to forgive the people that have done that and say or commit to a method of restoration that doesn't look like prison. Because I think also, like, as a society, our methods for rehabilitation don't work. Do you know what I mean? Like, sending someone to prison doesn't stop them, makes them more likely to reoffend. So then how do you, it's very complicated. But I don't know, like, I wish I did know the answer. I'm probably going to think about it and come back next time with a better answer for forgiveness. But complicated, very complicated.
Yeah. Well, with that being said,
sorry, terrible.
No.
Cut that bit.
It's all good. We have spoken about so much, man. Like I've like, even you saying I'm gonna take things away. I'm here being like, my brain is ticking at the moment. There's so much that's like unanswered, but also I know I'll think about the answer on the long drive home. I'll first want to say a massive thank you.
Thank you, man,
for coming down. Happy belated birthday.
Thank you, brother.
Also, from
Happy
us.
birthday, I'm a friend.
Innit? That is hard. See on Ruben's birthday, the amount of times I had to play that song.
Yeah, wheeling. He was like, Daddy,
listen, I had to keep wheeling it. Every time it finished, wheel it back up, Daddy. I thought he was just playing with Marble Run. Wheel it back up.
Pull that.
For real. But I want to say a massive thank you once again, Ben. Where can people find you if they haven't already found you?
Don't worry about it, man. It's all good. You'll see me when you see me. No, I'm at the Real Ben Hurst on all socials. Except TikTok. I'm not really on TikTok, but search The Real Ben Hurst anywhere. Or you can find me through work at Beyond Equality. I think it's Beyond_Equality on all socials, and maybe just Beyond Equality on LinkedIn. But yeah, if you got any thoughts, any questions, any challenges, feel free to like drop me a message. DM? Yeah, drop me a DM or shoot me an email or whatever. But it might be 3 to 5 business weeks. Yeah, man, I'm slow, bro. I get overwhelmed easily.
Man said business weeks.
I get overwhelmed. That
means no half terms.
No, I want to say a huge thank you. Also, you got an amazing TEDx that was a few years ago. Now.
I think 2019. Actually,
wow. It's called Boys Won't Be Boys, They'll Be What We Tell Them to Be.
What we teach them to be. Yeah. And then do I have others? There's 2 more as well.
You got 2 more?
But they're both interviews. They're not actually TEDx talks, yeah. Okay. One with Kay. Rufa, have you had Kay on here?
No.
Yeah, you need to get Kay on. He runs the Smiling Black Boys project.
Right.
Shout out to my guy. Shout out to my guy Kay. Come through, man. Come through. So he runs a really good project.
Yeah.
And then one with my friend Jamie Windus.
Yes, I've seen that,
which was cool as well. But yeah, check them out. Run those views up. They're useful. They're actually
They are.
Yeah, they're good.
They're good. All right. Huge thank you once again, Ben.
Thank you, man.
This has been a great chat, right?
It's been phenomenal.
Yes,
phenomenal.
One.
I could genuinely. The thing is, I could keep going, and I want to keep going. But yeah, it can't happen.
But for real, as we come to the end of this podcast, as ever, get at us. You can email us at otbpodcastuk@gmail.com. Please leave comments, leave reviews, leave messages. We're not getting enough of them from you lot. And I know you're all listening because you're DMing us privately, but actually send stuff through on our account, OTB Podcast UK, on Instagram and on X/Twitter. And thank you all for listening. Have a great rest of your day.